the CTA. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll be able to, hopefully you'll be able to submit your like website link to me so I can look at your code, but also just look at it from a user perspective.
Okay.
And so yeah, deployment's definitely in there. Yeah. You can deploy anywhere you want. But you know, you'll be encouraged to deploy with Heroku on the back end and Netlify on the front end, but there's no actual requirement on like where to deploy.
Okay. Gotcha.
Do you feel like you or want to cover deployment today?
Yeah, I would like definitely like to go over that more so for, I believe it was the back end.
Okay. Yeah, we could do something like that. Sure.
Yeah, I have the same question as well.
Same thing about you want to do deployment.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
What else do we want?
I want to talk about backend stuff, like queries and stuff like that.
Okay. So it definitely sounds like we're going to be building a backend today. What else do we need to cover? Okay, well, let's start with building on a backend and not worry about the front end for now. Anybody have any ideas of a fun little project we can make? If not, it's okay. I'll think of something.
Maybe something with signing and login and.
Okay, so that's front end stuff, essentially.
Okay.
But we can keep our code flexible enough that we'll add that. So if we have time to go front end, we can go front end. So let's build on a back end first. So let's start with, I'm gonna create a new project. I'm gonna share my screen here. Yeah, share screen. And we can start building something. Okay, so let's go all the way into our own projects, I guess. So this is not DSA. This will be, I don't know what we should call this. I guess we'll call this, we'll just make a directory called extras for miscellaneous thing. CD into, and then let's go ahead and make a project. So let's make, we'll call this CTA review, and we'll CD into our CTA review. Okay, so now we have a empty full project. And that way we can start taking notes on what we want. Okay, so let's create a backend because we know we're going to be building on a backend. I'm going to open up a terminal. Let's create a README. Okay, and so let's think about it. So we want to have, we'll have users. So users will have, let's say, we'll have their email. They'll have, I guess, an ID, an email. What else do we want our users to have? Anything? Maybe that's it. Maybe it doesn't matter. Do we want to have them have, let's make a to-do app, yeah? Let's have to-dos. Is that okay? Have we made too many of these? Thoughts?
Yes, too many to do.
Yes, to-dos?
Yeah, why not?
Okay. Wait, in the nonverbal feedback feature, give me a yes or no if we're cool with the to-dos, a to-do app. So,
Hey Corey, how hard would it be to make like a backend for like a chatbot or something?
so the chatbot will be a different concept because we'd have to be using WebSockets if we want to be able to keep things
Okay.
open.
Okay.
And I'm definitely not prepared to do that. I'm going to learn that though later today because I am working on something that involves WebSockets. So maybe I'll be able to help you with that in the future, but I think that one will be harder than, I don't have a good image for how we would build that.
Okay, that's okay.
Okay, people seem to be cool with the 4 people said yes, nobody said no, so let's just do it. So we'll have to-dos. To-dos will have an ID. Let's say we give them a body. They'll have a author ID. Anything else we feel that they need? That seems like a good place to start. Maybe we want a timestamp or something. Maybe we'll say like a created at or something. All right. So with this in mind, if this is kind of our tables, let's go ahead and start building on a backend. So I'll cd my backend. I'm going to npm init -y. Let's go ahead and start installing the things we need. So shout them out. What's one thing we might need?
Express, course,
Express.
body parser,
Okay. Anything else?
Axios, maybe.
I don't think we're gonna need access on the back end. We could, but let's install that one if we need it. We definitely are gonna need PG Promise as well. Anything else? Maybe not. I didn't. I did install. Okay, great. So that should give us some node. Let's also make a get ignore in here. Ignore. It auto changed it on me before I finished. Okay, and in here, let's go ahead and add our node modules so that those will be grayed out. I'm also gonna make a environment file for our environment variables because I am gonna possibly host this at the end. So I'm gonna go ahead and start. I know I'm gonna need a port, so I'm gonna make it 3001. I know I'm gonna have a database URL, which will point to something that I don't know yet. So let's go figure out, let's just leave that for now. I know it's not finished. We'll go into our backend. We have to make a database folder. So let's go into our database folder. Let's go ahead and make a schema.sql. Schema.sql. That's not how you spell schema, right? Is that how you spell schema? Sure.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got a schema.sql. Let's go ahead and create, or I don't really totally remember the order. I think it's drop database if exists, and then we say the name of the database. So for this one, let's just call this like to do database. I'm just gonna call it that because I know I don't already have one in there. I would have probably just call it to-dos app or something. I'll call it to-do database, and then I'll say create database if exists. Create database to do database. Let's go ahead and \c into it so we have access to it. And now we have to create our tables, and so I'm going to say drop table users if exists, and then let's go ahead and create table users, and I think we can put stuff in here, right? Like ID, serial primary key. Now I might change this later on if we ended up doing Firebase, because I might want to give my users a set ID, which I would be getting from Firebase. We have an email. Let's say varchar. We should make those unique. Unique. Hopefully that's correct. Let's also create our to-dos table. Is this in the right order? I think it might be like that, right? Anybody remember? All right, well, we'll just see. All right, so a lot of this is pretty repetitive. Table to-dos. Whoops. And we said our to-dos will have an ID, which we said will be serial primary key. We said our to-dos will have a body, an author ID, and a created at. So let's go ahead and say body, which is going to be varchar. Let's say author ID, which will be, anyone remember? It's like references. Do I have to say what it is? Int references users ID on delete set. Let's say on delete cascade. So if a user deletes themselves, we'll also be deleting that user's to-dos. And then let's go ahead and say created at. And I don't remember this key, so I'm gonna look it up. So I'm gonna say like, I could completely look it up, or I could say I know that I've done a project like this in the past, because I think it's like created at timestamp current date. But I just used this the other day. So I'm just referencing an old piece of work. Totally fine during the CTA. Like this. So I can see created at with time zone. Whoops. Default current stamp. So this will just automatically create a time associated to it. Great. So that should be my schema. I can go ahead and just populate a couple things in here just for fun, I guess. So, but maybe I'll do that on a different full file. So first, let's go ahead and just do, let's make this. So I'm going to say PSQL-F and then the relative path to the schema. And I have some bug. So it says syntax error at or near this. Probably this trailing comma. Let's see. Yep, great. All right, so now that we're there, I am going to comment this code out before I get too far ahead of myself. And let's also start a Git. Oh, I would, right, well, it's the Git for the whole class, so I'm not gonna write anything. Okay, questions so far? Let's go ahead and create some extra data here. So I'm gonna write seeds.sql, and let's just seed the data. So I'm gonna connect with our database. Oops. And I'm gonna say insert into users. And And I think I just can pass. This is just going to take in a email. And then, does anybody remember the syntax for this? Is it just values? I really mean this as a question, if anybody remembers. All right, I'm gonna take the silence as that we don't remember. Unless people are writing in the chat, I'm not able to see this. Maybe they are. Go to go. Sorry, guys, something came up. Oh, okay. See you later. All right, let's check. I didn't put any data in here, but I definitely have a different project where I'm sure that I have. So I'm just going to go to something else that I've worked on in the past. Looks like I've already done a to-do app in the past. Maybe I put some crap in there already. Nope. I guess I didn't. All right, well, I for sure did it in a different app. Where would I have done it for sure? Disinterest. But I might have done that in a seed file, like in here. But it will still tell me. Okay, I think we're doing it right. All right, so I'm just gonna go for it. And then let's go ahead and insert into to-dos, where we said it's gonna take in a body and an author ID. The others two will be created by themselves. Body, author ID, values. So let's pretend that I know this is going to be 1, 2, and 3. I'll say like, I think I need to do exercise. I think these have to be single quotes. Exercise by 1. Let's see. Okay. Let's say eat. Sleep can be done by John. And, oops. Code can be by John. Jenya will just leave blank. We won't give her anything. Okay. All right, let's see if this works. So let's go ahead and run this file, psql-f db backend/db/seeds. Okay, and so we've inserted those things into the database. Let's go check with our pSQL to make sure that everything is working the way we want them to. So this one we're calling to do, what do we call it? To do database. And we'll connect and we'll see we have 3 users and we have some data for them. Okay, great. So now we have a backend and a database that we know is currently full of stuff. So that's important, right? So now we can start playing around with some routes and queries. So let's see, what's the first thing? I mean, it depends on which way we want to go, but this is done. This is done. We still don't have our database URL. So the database's URLs are always the same type of thing. I have that somewhere, hang on. It's gonna be Postgres. Postgres / localhost 5432. This is for our pSQL, and then we'll call this to-do database. Okay, so now we have our database URL as well. Last thing oh, you know what we also need to install? We need to install .env. So npm install .env. Don't want to forget that. And then we should be good. Okay, so now let's go ahead and start to build out our actual server. So let's go ahead and make an app.js. And we will just start hacking away. So I guess the first thing we'll have is const express, which will be requiring of express. We can have an app, which is express invoked. We'll have our port, which we'll say is process.env.port. We have to be able to read the process. So let's also go ahead and do, I'm just going to require .env.config to get that going. Let's go ahead and get our body parser going. So that's going to be require body parser. Let's do cores. We said we need, so that's going to be require, I don't know, what am I doing? Sorry. Cores. Anything else that we need to require? Anyone remember anything else? All right. If not, then let's go ahead, say app.listen, and we'll pass in our port. And I'm going to have a little callback function here that's just going to log like listening to port. And I'm going to write port. Cool. So let's just see if that part of our backend works. So I'm going to do node mod at app.js. Okay, already broke. Cannot reference cores before initialization. Oh, okay, that's because it's not a string. Okay, great. So now our port is running. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead up and set up the other things for our cores. So I'm going to go ahead and say, oops, app.use. Let's go ahead and say cores. And we also want to have body parser. So we'll say body parser.url encoded. I think it's like extended. And we could say true or false. I don't think it really matters. At least I don't know the intricate details of that. Body parser.json, I think, is the next thing. Everything is still working and running. So that looks, how do I can clear it? Oh, there we go. Okay, so that looks good. I'm clearing that with Command K, just so you know. Some people still have don't have all the shortcuts yet. So I'm going to try to say them more often. Okay, so we've got our app running. Let's go ahead and add some routes. So if I'm setting up a project for real, I'm probably making a routes folder. And so let's start with just like some to-do routes. Oops. Sure, I'll do it like this. To-dos, because I'm going to be super organized on this one. I'm going to say to-dos.js. Okay, so if we want to start building on our routes, we have to start using Express Router. So for this one, I'm going to call this to-dos, and I will require express.router. Right, so now we have this router. and I can say to-dos dot like, now it depends on what do we want to do, like what should be available for our application, what kind of routes are we interested in having. And that's totally up to for debate. So what do you all think?
Probably get and post.
Okay, so we should definitely be able to post a new a new route, make a new to-do. And do we want to be able to get all to-dos or just get to-dos for a specific user?
For a specific user.
Okay, yeah. So that sounds totally fine with me. I'm trying to see, the thing is right now that I'm struggling with is I'm trying to look really far ahead into how the code will work if we were to do have authentication and all that in the front end, because my current user will have an ID. So I won't have to pass any information back besides that token that will get decoded in the middleware. But for now, doesn't really matter. So why don't we just say, so I think getting all to-dos for a user should be specific to a user route. That sounds like a nested route to me. So, but for this one, let's go ahead and do the post because I think you're right about that. And we can just say post. So whenever we trying to get a new to-do, we will have to do some kind of create to-do method that we haven't written yet, right? And then we'll do module.exports object that posts that. Oh, I think we can just do it like this. Okay, so this is gonna complain eventually as soon as we hook this up, but we can hook it up with just a couple steps. So we can also make our queries folder, queer. Does that spell queries? Something's off. There we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and make our to-dos in there. So we'll say to-dos, and maybe we'll make a to-dos .js. And so in here, we will also, well, we'll need access to something from our database, but we don't have that yet. So for now, I'm just going to say const create to-do. It's going to take in request, res, and next. It's going to be async. And I'm not going to write anything yet, but I am going to export it so that things aren't broken when I connect things. Okay, so we have our create to do, and our to-dos have to require that. So const create to do from our require of dot dot slash dot dot slash query slash to do slash to do. Okay, great. So now let's go ahead and use our to-dos in here. So we can go ahead and import to-dos router. So we'll say const to-dos router from our requirement of dot slash routes slash to-dos slash to-do. And we can specify our route. So app.use, whenever somebody goes to slash API slash to-dos, I want to go to the to-dos router code. Okay. I also, our app broke. So let's see what's wrong. Can't find module express. Looks like I made a spelling error. Okay, let's save that. Okay, our port is still running. So now we're back to being good. Let me clear that so I can have like a better effect if there's a mistake that will catch my eye. And let's also just add a little bit of error handling on this app. So I'm going to say app.use, and this will just take an error, a request, a response, and next. So in the event that we do have an error, I will console log our error so that we'll be able to read it. But I'm also going to say like, hey, if error.status Then I'm going to say res.status error.status.json, and I'll pass up the error. So our code doesn't just all break, but instead I'm actually sending a response. Otherwise, I'm just going to say status 500 and JSON R error. Okay, so this way I can throw errors in my app with a status in the object so that I can have like 401 errors, 422 errors, and whatnot. Okay, so let's see if our post works. So let's go open up Postman. And it's verifying that Postman is a thing, which it is. Okay, cool. So we said this is going to be / to-dos, post request, body we care about. And so for these, we'll give it a, oh, well, we haven't actually done any logic yet, right? So if we think about our queries, definitely don't work right now, but let's just respond. Hitting post. Okay, so for now, we'll just be hitting the post. We'll send, and we get hitting post. Okay, so things are working. We do hit the route. It's safe to continue to move on. Okay, so from here, it's time to actually insert something into our database. Well, we need the ability to do that. So let's go ahead and create an index in our DB that will be a connection for when we can want to access something in our database. So let's create a new file. I'm going to call this index.js. And we're going to use .env again. So require .env.config. And then let's go ahead and require our PG promise as PGP. And we have to invoke that. We'll pass in an empty object. And then let's go ahead and make our DB, which we will pass into PGP process.env. I think it's called database. Database URL. Okay, cool. And we will export that. Great. Any questions so far?
No.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate the feedback. I can't see anybody or anything, so like, it's hard. I'm not sure. It's hard to know. Okay, so we've got our index connected. We've got our route there. We've got our app. I'm gonna close app for now, and let's go ahead and start trying out this. Let's go ahead and require our DB. Cool. Require of // /db/index. Great. And so now we can go, we'll throw in a try catch, error, next, error, and then let's go ahead and actually do some of our logic. So when we created a to-do, maybe we want the to-do back, maybe we don't. This is a personal decision and dependent on your needs. I'm going to say for right now, I don't need my to-do back. So I'm just going to say await db.none because I don't want anything back. And I can go ahead and write my code. So I'm going to say insert into to-dos. What's the said insert into to-dos, and then, okay, it's going to be like this, right? And we're going to say, anybody remember syntax? Let's see. I think it's just body and author ID. We'll say values. And here I can pass in my objects here. So I'm going to say body, and I'm going to say author ID. Right, so that should be good, right? This isn't me trying to escape the string. This is part of using PG promise. I don't want to escape the string and specifically just inject the JavaScript in there. I want to, it's safer for me to do it this way because the data becomes like sanitized, I believe. Okay, so this takes in a second argument. And for this one, I'm going to have my request dot. I'm just going to take the whole body of the request because I'm going to assume for now, I'm going to assume that I'm passing in the user ID from the front end. In real life, I won't. So in real life, I have this kind of a function here when I'm working with my Firebase authentication, where I can go ahead and get my token, right? And I can decode that token. And then I can grab like the email or the ID from that decoded token. And I could put it on a request object if I felt like it, right? And so I could say request.user and have it do this object. So then if I wanted the ID in here, I would be doing like, to get that ID, I would be saying request.user.id, and I would assign that to the body. So I'd be like, request.body.id is equal to request.user.id. So I wouldn't actually be sending it back, right? I would be getting it from the back end. That way, someone would actually have to be signed in through Firebase to add their own to-do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but for now, since I don't know if we're going to really have time to build in a full app with auth and everything, because it really takes a long time, right? But I mean, it takes like 4 hours, but if I'm talking through it, it's probably like 7 hours or so. I don't know. Maybe it's faster. Just depends on how quick we can move and how in depth we want things. But so I'm going to pretend that I'm passing that in as well. And then, assuming that this all works, I'm going to do my JSON, and I'm just going to send a message to the user that says new to-do was created, or something like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this route. So we'll go back to our Postman. It says we need a ID. So let's go ahead and give this to me, I guess. So ID of 1, this is an author ID. I'm the user 1. So we'll say, and we'll have a body. And our body will be like, dance all over the place. Okay, let's just say I want to dance all over the place. Let's send that post request. And we say new to-do was created. Let's make sure that that really did happen. We'll refresh this. And we see, okay. ID, author ID is 1, dance all over the place. We see the time that has changed as well. So we see that that's working. It is 2:44, right? Which is 14:44 in 35 seconds, I guess. So the timing is also correct. Great. So now we have the ability to post. Let's go also just make it so we can get all to-dos for a user. So I'm just gonna pretend like that's a user route. Because I think that should be like a route that would be like /API/users. I don't know. So this like depends. So if I was doing it so like anybody could access it, this would be my user ID, and then I would say /todos. But if I was really doing this for like authentication purposes, I wouldn't be passing my user ID. I would just grab the current user that's already signed in. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So if I just so then I would just be doing API/todos, because this would only ever get me the to-dos for the current user. So let's do it. I'd like to do it this way, but we won't actually have access to the ID of the user, which we kind of need. But this is more realistic to what you'd probably want to do on your full stack. So how can we get around this? Oh, I hear a Dwakabasi's fire alarm.
I'm muting myself.
It's okay. I'm starting to like it for some reason. Okay. Which way do we want to do it for this?
Like the
Okay.
real one, the line
So
21.
I'm going to do it this way, and I'm not going to ever grab an individual to do. I'm going to call this author ID. I'm going to do it like this so that we don't have to build a lot more route files and stuff, because I think you guys can do that. And then it'll be easier to adapt later on, okay? I won't have to restructure. So with that in mind, then we'll go into our to-do routes, and let's make it a to-do.get. And someone will be getting something based off of an author ID. And we will want to fetch to-dos for one user, right? That's really what I would like to do. Don't currently have that, so let's go ahead and add that into our queries. Oops, sorry. I'm adding it down there first, and I'm just gonna say const fetch to-dos for one. Okay, let's see if, okay, so this is all green now. That's great, so everything is still connected appropriately. Let's do our await. We'll do our, sorry, it should be async, right? This takes in a request, a response, and a next. We'll do our try catch, which is our error. Next, we'll pass in our error. We'll have, so let's say I want to get all of them. So I'm going to say, I'm going to call this to-dos. And I will await, and I'll say db.any. So for any of the to-dos that someone might have, and let's go ahead and let's just do it like this. So select star from to-dos, where, and I will say author ID is equal to, and I'll just do my $1, and I'll pass in the second argument, which will be request.params.author ID. In reality, I would be doing request.user.id, because I would want to have the current user. That's if I was really doing like this full stack app, but I don't currently, so I'm just going to keep doing it this way. Somebody wrote something to me. Okay, so we've got this. Hey, I spelled misspelling. Okay. Once we get that to work, let's send back some JSON. I'm going to say to-dos, and going to have a message that's going to say like all to-dos for specified user. Maybe I do something like that. Okay. Will this work? Maybe. Let's try it. So we'll say, let's go ahead and try to get all of my to-dos, Corey's to-dos. So we'll just say slash to-dos and we'll say /1. Now, I'm not talking about the first to-do. This is the author, right? I know it's a little confusing. All right. And we do get all of the to-dos, right? We get my exercise, my eat, and my dance all over the place. Anybody see anything that we can improve with this? Might be nice down the road. Yeah, okay. So maybe there's nothing. What I was originally thinking about is that we could have joined into the users table so that I could have the author's information as well. That probably doesn't matter for this one because in reality, we'd only be getting the to-dos of the person signed in and we would already have their information because they're signed in. So I agree with you in this situation. That said, if I was trying to get all of the comments for a post, then I might be thinking about doing some kind of join here where I would be saying like, hey, join users on users.id equal to to-dos.author ID, right? Because if I do that and I hit send, then we would be getting like Corey's email. Like we have the actual name of the person doing it, if that makes sense. For this problem, we probably don't need this join because we really we'd only be looking at the current user ideally. Any questions on that?
So basically, there is a
No.
different post. So it's better like to do the join to see like each one what they're doing.
Yeah, so like if I had comments on a post, right? Like if I was building Reddit or something and I had all these different comments, I would want I might not just want the user ID, but I'd probably want the username or something. And so then I would want to join. But for this scenario, I probably don't need the user's email because that user's already signed in with their email.
Sure.
Okay, so I am going to delete that for now, but I just want us to be aware that that is something we could think about. Okay, so now we have our fetch to-dos for one user. In our we've got our queries and our routes. I'd say our backend looks like it's in pretty good shape right now. So let's go ahead and see if we can figure out how to host this, I guess. So to host it, I'm kind of worried because I didn't put this in a new repository. And so it has all of our 6.4 data, and that's not really what I want to host. So I'm trying to think of a good way around this.
Would you mind, like, would it be easier to like talk through the hosting process?
Yeah, but we
Or,
can
like, yeah,
also,
show the steps.
you know, I'm also happy to like try to do it. I'm just trying to think of a way around it, around what I'm thinking. Let's just kind of go for it. And I'll initialize a get in here and see if it complains. No, it doesn't. Get stats, and I'll just delete this get later. Get add, get commit to do app. Okay, and so I've got this app here. And so if I want to make so I've got to make sure that my Heroku line is in. So I'm gonna say which Heroku. and I see, okay, that works. I have a Heroku. And then I can go ahead and create a project. So I'm going to say Heroku create. And I'm just going to call this to do, what have we been calling it? Demonstration, right? So I'm going to say demonstration. We'll see if it complains. No. Okay. So now I've got a to do demonstration. I'm going to check to see if this here already got added as a remote. So I'm going to say get remote dash V.
You put get remove.
Yeah, you almost removed it.
And I do have it. It's already added that as a remote, my Heroku, so I don't need to add that. It's already there. So now I'm going to create my Postgres database. So I'm going to say Heroku add-ons, create Heroku PostgreSQL hobby-dev. Think that's it. Okay, looks like it's doing something. This database is empty. Sounds great. Now from here, let's see. I pulled up the highlights. Let's update our project. So I've already created the MV. I've already done all the port stuff, right? I did that as I was programming because I knew eventually we would be doing this.
Yeah.
I've already installed our .env everywhere. So I really don't have that much I need to do, which is the nice thing here. I am going to update our package JSON to have a start script. Oops. And our start script will just say node app.js. And okay. What else? Okay, let's now run our SQL that we created. So to do that, I can say Heroku pg psql-f, and now the relative path. So that's the backend, the DB, and the schema first. Okay, let's pretend I also want to insert those seeds. So I'm also going to run the seeds. To do database. Oh, right. So if I'm doing the seeds, so my mistake, I need to comment this out because I don't want to be connecting. Let's try again. Great. I've inserted everything. The next step is, so we do have like this front and back end setup, even though we haven't finished that. So I'm going to make a package JSON in the front end. So I'm going to say npm init-y. And I'm going to add a script in here for start. So this will just be start. And when we start, I want to cd into our backend. And I want to npm install. And I want to npm start. Okay, so I'm going to stick with that. And now we should be ready to deploy. So I'm going to say git status, git add, git status, git commit. And I'm going to say prepare for backend deployment. And I'm going to git push Heroku master. And now we wait 45 minutes. No, just kidding. We don't have much in here. It should be pretty quick. Okay, so apparently it's deployed. Let's go check this out. Let's see if this works. So we will go here. Okay, so we didn't have anything for just that. So let's go ahead and hit our specific routes. We said API slash to-dos slash one, because we know Corey has a few to-dos in there. And there we go, exercise and eat. I'm going to assume the post works as well. Although, actually, we can make it. We can test that as well. Let's do that. We'll go to our Postman. We'll do our post. This time we will just post to-dos. For our body, I'm going to use the same things as before, because you'll notice that dance all over the place wasn't there because that's not something we originally put in. So let's go ahead and put it in to our hosted app. So I'm going to send that. We do get new to-do as created. If I refresh for Corey, I also see that now I have dance all over the place. And boom, our backend is hosted. Not so bad, right? So we didn't really do too much. We updated our package JSON for the application. We updated our package JSON for our backend. We just commented out anywhere where we're like entering into the database, and we just followed the Heroku like setup commands outlined perfectly in the highlights document, which you will all have access to during your CTA. Except for people have edit access, so unless somehow everyone deleted it. I don't know why I set it up that way. Doesn't matter. That is everything that would have to do with this with the back end of this miniature application for right now. Any questions on anything here? Let me know. Let me know now. Now would be a good time.
So you said we're all going to have access to a highlights doc, right? And that's going to like help us detail.
Well, yes. So your CTA, you can do anything except for you shouldn't ask for help from each other.
Yeah.
But you can Google your brains out. You can look at any of your past projects and work, including my projects and work. Also, if you know that I'm doing something that you didn't do yet. But Google is king, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, the highlights document is also available, of course.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, Corey.
Does this help? I don't
Yes.
have
Yeah.
scales. Yeah?
Yeah, this helped a lot. It went by way faster than what like I originally remember. So that's good.
So part of what made that faster, Ujwaga Bossi, was planning ahead. So I put like this port here and stuff as well. But that wasn't really that. Yeah, it's actually, it's just not that many things that you really need to do. Deploying's not as scary as it needs to, as it gets its name for, kind of. So is there anything else that we want to go over or need help with? Or was this everything?
Pretty much. This doesn't really have to do with CTAs per se, but I was looking online and like trying to see where like you could possibly use DSAs, like, or how you can implement that in a project. So I was wondering, like, I didn't really understand like where you could like really implement linked lists, like if you were creating an app or something like that.
Good question. Where would I create linked lists? I'm not sure where I would need to create a linked list. You would definitely need. So a lot of the things we've learned for data structures and things are like learning how, like, it's like what are those wheels that help you when you're learning how to ride a bike? Training wheels, right? Some of them are like training wheels in the sense of like and also they're all good for here, let me stop sharing the screen so I can like be a little more intimate. Also, they're good for solving these like problems that show up in these interview situations. But as far as like real life application, a lot of them are like training wheels, meaning like, hey, you kind of see what it's like to be riding a bike and everything, but it's not really a bike at the end of the day. Not yet. But you can see that it could turn into a bike. So like you like hash maps and all of that is, you know, using those linked lists, and that's a big use, and that all gets really created like big time when it comes to LRU caches, which is means like I think last recently used, which is like when you're playing a video game, like it doesn't load the entire level and stuff, right? Like you're moving through it and it's creating things, but if you look back, there's still things there, but only so far. Otherwise it'd have to go reload and generate all that stuff and you'd run out of memory. Same with like going through your phone and like having an infinite list. It goes sometimes if you scroll for a long time and then you try to go all the way back up, it actually has to reload the top because it's let go of that because you're no longer using it because it only has a finite amount of memory and space. And so that's all part of what's called an LRU cache. They're like everywhere. And part of how you can make an LRU cache is with linked lists.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Those sort of
Yeah,
like
I know that might not be like the greatest answer that you've ever wanted. Same with like trees. Like trees can be really helpful for like sorted information and everything, but trees are kind of like the training wheels for graphs, where you end up with kind of way more complicated and also way more interesting types of problems often. So trying to figure out who are good suggested friends, or the shortest distance, or calculating like airfare versus time traveling, like how long things take also, versus number of transfers. Like those could all be different weights of things that you would look for graphs, and those types of things. Like those can travel all, like when you're looking at Google Maps and you're trying to figure out the shortest path and how long things take, and then there's different weight, could be like the speed limits and things like that, right? So something maybe shorter in distance but slower to actually get there, or there's teams of travel, and that's all like different types of graph. My wife's all dressed up. That's all different kinds of like graphing problems, which share some similarities to how we traverse trees.
So
Okay.
it's like watching how the data moves, or sort of like seeing what happens in the background, or like watching how data is being handled. Is that sort of like with using queues and stuff like that? Like what's happening now? When is it getting rid of that data, grabbing new data? You know, like in what order things are happening, I guess. I don't know.
Well, so queues are happening whenever we're doing breadth first searches, right? That's all built around a queue. So that's like where queues are really powerful. So you might not really need to implement a queue too often in your code, although that is something I'm working on doing right now for questions. But that's all for those breadth first search, which lead into like those graph problems. While stacks you're using all the time, but with recursive calls usually, and depth first types of searches.
Okay.
So you use all of these data structures, just like you wouldn't just ride your bike with just the training wheels, kind of like, although for different like interviews and things, you may be asked about those, because you're probably not going to be asked something that's like riding on a motorcycle. You know, no one's going to ask you necessarily to design like an extremely efficient type of travel for airplanes things. Like maybe for a senior dev role, I don't know. I'm not. If somebody asked me that, I'd be like, have a good day. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, because I was trying to like see like maybe if I could find ways to like implement it in like a real life app, because I find like doing things like that helps me understand it a bit
Well,
better.
you could make an application about those data structures. and
Okay.
show visual demonstrations of how they work and things like that.
Okay.
If you wanted.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
That'd be
Okay. Anything else people want to go over? I mean, I'm free till 6. This is like what I have planned. I don't have to go that long. Hope I don't have to, but I will. So anything anyone wants me to go over or has questions about, this is a really good time.
You answered pretty much all my questions, but
Really? That's
yeah.
awesome.
Are you gonna push the code that you wrote today?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, awesome, cool. Thank you.
No problem. I will do that now while people are thinking of their last questions here. Like, you can still ask me questions during the CTA, but I may not be able to answer them all as in depth. So I'm just gonna CD into CTA review. I'm gonna rm-rf.get. So I don't really want that. And I'll CD get status.
So Corey, so like I guess like after the CTA or like I'm guessing like hackathons afterwards, this is just like portfolio building at this point, right? Or or the structure of our lessons going to change in any way? I guess is a better question.
Yeah, right. So yeah, the class is definitely changing, right? The core content is done. For the most part, I mean, but like there still will be lectures throughout, but there will be more working on and preparing for the interviews, right? So we have CTA. We will then have hackathon. I think there's like little breaks in between, but and then we have we'll start working on our capstone projects. So that will be a big group project that will have quite a bit of time to be working on. And I think the way they're structuring that now is they want me to like have lessons, intermixed in there. So it wouldn't just be work days every day, but maybe half days on some would have some lectures. So what I'll be lecturing about, I might go more in depth on some DSA things. I might go more in depth on review some ideas that we might not have gone too deeply into, like closures or, revisiting all the uses of spread operators and how we can use those to our advantage. Just like little things, depending on how we're doing, right? During that time, we might also split the days of working on your portfolio page because you need to have a website, right? We'll be starting with resume building, working on our writing cover letters, full stack front end and back end kind of cover letters, practicing more whiteboarding situations where you guys can interview each other as well as I can get involved in that as well.
Yeah.
So that's like just doing lots and lots of those types of reps and then starting to apply to jobs as well. And also probably making a personal project would be nice as well, like another personal project with maybe a slightly different technology.
Okay, that's cool. Because I figured it'd be like sharpening, like being that the core stuff is done, I think it'd be like a good time to like, all right, time to just make sure like we're all really good at these things that we probably like touched on.
Definitely, yeah. Also, we might talk about air boundaries. That might be a new thing too, because I did say I want to do a lesson on that.
Yeah.
And then event like way down the road. I mean, if everybody's like really sharp, but like really most important is like, right, jack of all trades, master of none. We've heard that expression. So like, I might go into small introductions of Ruby at some point. We'll see, because Ruby's freaking sweet. I was working on a problem today that I can't solve in JavaScript, but can solve in Ruby because of the way the languages handle really large numbers. So, but like, it's more important to be like very, very good at one before like being like okay at one and confused of the other. You know,
Yeah,
like excellent.
sure. I figured that. So yeah, it's gonna be cool. So
But yeah, but most of the content is really done, which I'm excited about. Last year I co-taught, so I didn't teach every subject completely. So last year I didn't do anything with hosting, and so I didn't really know hosting that well going into this year. Now I feel like I really know it, so that's fun.
yeah, this is cool. It's just crazy. Like I can't like I was talking to my mom and I was just like, yeah, like the core part of Pursuit is done, and she was like, what? Like it feels like super short, but it's also been super long. I don't know. Like
You're like, yeah, I can build stuff now.
yeah, it's crazy. So yeah, it's awesome.
That's really cool. Any other questions from anybody? Anything they need me to go over?
Thank you, Corey. It was really helpful.
Oh, you're welcome. You are. And of course, everybody's welcome to drop off whenever they want, right? Still no requirement. And just because you're here doesn't mean you have to stay.
Thank you guys. Thanks, Corey. I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll see you tomorrow, Corey. Good night.
Yeah, I'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.
See ya. All right, so if we're doing that, we have to CD into extra. Okay, what did I call this thing? Okay, so now let's go ahead and create our front end. So I'm just gonna say npx create React app, and we will say front end. What happened? Oh, I misspelled create React app. Dragobasi.
Yeah.
I mean, this is for everybody, but this is just something you and I were talking about the other day. It's just you and Siham anyway. You notice how when like were you able to like see that flow of the way I was building out that back end?
Yeah, and like you checking like piece by piece to make sure that each part was working before you went on to the next one.
Yeah. Did that feel like it made sense and felt like something like, oh, I could do this?
Oh yeah, it was definitely better, and like it was like way of a smoother transition. I think like I'm always so like focused on like just creating instead of like testing, which is like where I get like into all the issues, because like again, like not consistently checking and not knowing which bug is which and all those things.
Yeah, totally. Because like you want to yeah, because also this way, like we didn't have to do a bunch of like, because we saw there were definitely mistakes. I made errors, but it didn't really feel like it that much because we just took one at a time as we saw them, you know. So it's like, oh, that's just a little comma. Let me just remove that, you know, instead of at the end.
Right, and you
like,
didn't have to go through like so many things to figure out like, well, dang, when was the mistake made, or like, you know, how far back was it?
Exactly. So. That's one of the biggest helpers is like, well, I wrote these 2 lines and now it's not working. So the mistake is in these
has
2
to be
lines.
one of those 2 lines, yeah.
And that is so much. Oh my God, it saves so much time.
Compared to the
when you're like, okay, so there's a mistake somewhere in the app. It's like,
yeah.
You're like, God, I hope it's just the one.
Yeah, that was
so
brutal.
just try to do that on your CTA also, because it really will help you so you don't get like too bogged down. Okay. So I don't know if we need to do custom hooks. We could do something, but so custom hooks are just hooks that are custom, right? So they often use hooks inside of themselves. So maybe we'll make a new user for this, and then we'll make a custom hook for the input or something, because that seems like a good place to have a custom hook.
Okay. Yeah, it wasn't like mandatory. I just wanted to like really like make sure I know like hooks
Well, I want you to, I really want you to know use effect and use state like really well.
Okay.
How do you feel on those two?
So like usually with use effect and like use state, what I do is like I try to match them up with like when we're doing like when we switch from class to functional. So like I'll be like, okay, well, this is what I would have used instead of component did mount or one of those things, and it kind of helps me like connect those dots.
Fantastic.
But I want to be able to get to a point where I don't necessarily need to do that.
Oh, interesting. Well, yeah, well, you just want to be able to think of it as like component did mount is use effect. Component
Yeah.
will unmount is use effect, and component did update is use effect, instead of like I will use this in place. But yeah, I hear you. That just comes with like building a lot of things.
Yeah.
I didn't know hooks before this year either, right? I don't know if you
Really?
knew that. Yeah, yeah.
I would have never guessed that.
I just learned them like a couple weeks before you guys. And so like I only know them because I had to like really teach them and practice in them. And that makes really a world of difference. Okay, so we'll CD into our front end. Let's get this thing going. Let's get it started. Ha! Wee-hee-hee. All right, so we'll open our logo host. It can't be reached yet. That's fine. Open up our terminal or console. Sorry. Okay, this is happening. So first thing I'm going to do is go into my app. I'm going to delete all this crap that I don't want. Don't want this logo because that's going to bother me. A message. Might as well delete it. Don't need an extra file that I'm not using. Okay, so we have our empty page. So let's go ahead and make a component that's like shows to-dos for a specific user. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm going to make new components. I'm not going to put Redux into this project. I think that would be overkill, unless if people really need it. In that case, I will.
No, that's okay.
Components. So I'm going to do this structure instead of the feature structure because I'm not using Redux Toolkit, and this feels like it will be easier for me. So I'm going to call this to-dos index. And I'm going to import React from React. And I'm going to export default to-dos index. Okay, great. That doesn't bother you, right? You get what I'm doing there.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So first thing I'm going to return is just like a div. And I'm going to say like h1 that says users to-dos. And let's go ahead and put this in our app just to make sure that everything is being connected. So to-dos index. And we see to-dos index. Okay, now ideally I would go to this page only when I am at like /to-dos / I like to have the ID. But for now, I'm just gonna leave it, okay? And because really, because of the whole ID thing was like if I had this user signed in, right? So it should just be like my home. So I have to grab the index. Well, I need the specific user ID. I'm gonna pretend that I only care, like this app is written for Corey. Corey's the only user right now. And so because of that, it's always going to be Corey's ID. How's that sound? Is that fair?
That works.
Okay. And so we want to see all of the to-dos here, let's say. That's the goal. We want to see all of Corey's to-dos. So if we want to do that, what do we need?
Wouldn't we need like the use state to keep track of it?
Okay, sure. Let's go ahead and do that. So we'll say use state. Sounds good. Let's go ahead and keep track. So these will be to-dos, you're thinking?
Yeah, like to-dos, set to-dos.
And what should this initialize as?
An empty array, I guess.
Sounds good. Okay. So, and how do we get these to-dos though? Where are those going to come from?
We're gonna get that from our backend.
Mm-hmm. So, where in the code? Should I just write it here, like axios.get? Will that be an issue?
Yeah, wouldn't we have to? It would be you would do an Axios call to get it from the back end.
Yeah, but if I do it here, okay, so let's say I do that. And I want it to be localhost. So let me just quickly make a new folder for util. Sorry. And this will be, I'm just going to call this API URL. This way I'll already have this ready for when I am hosting. And this is just going to export const API URL return window.location dot hostname, sorry, is equal to localhost. I will say HTTP 3001. Otherwise, well, I already have I do have the backend already hosted, right? So I can just go ahead like that. Okay, so now I have this will work for my local host or for my backend. Okay, so we've installed Axios. So, okay, so we know we need to import Axios. Oops. Okay, so let's say we have our Axios. Can I just do that here, or like, let me just do it the way I've been writing it lately. Just Axios. And I say method get and URL. Can I do this?
No, because wouldn't we also have to create the error handling as well?
Tell me more about that.
So this is where we would end up using use effect.
Yes. Okay, exactly. So why?
Because I believe because it's taking it in. So it's kind of like is it a callback? I think I'm confusing it.
Yeah, kind of. So use effect has the three behaviors, right? Component to mount, component did update, and component will
unmount.
So we want to go get this method just one time.
Okay.
Right? Because here, let me finish importing a couple things. So I'm going to import API URL from
going on with the school staff.
the school staff. Who's that? Is that you, Dwakabasi?
No, I think that was a Shia.
Oh, she is here now. Hey, Shia. And so we'll say API URL and we'll invoke it, right? So now we have this API and we can just put that in here. So once we want stuff back from this, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then when we get the to-dos back, we want to update our state, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what happens when we update the state? What does that cause?
Okay, so I remember something about you having to do it a certain way so that it wouldn't keep reloading.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So it causes a re-render when you set state. And so if we re-render and run this, then we'd have to run this again. And we'd be pinging it, setting state, pinging it, setting, and we just keep going. And we end up in this infinite loop. And so we only want this to run one time. And so that's why we're using useEffect, is because we can use useEffect as a component did mount behavior by putting in an empty dependency array. And because of that, I can put this inside of here, and this will only run one time. Because I want to use async await instead, I mean, I could chain a dot then, but I want to be consistent with our class. So I'm just going to make a function called fetch to-dos. That's going to be async. And I'll put this stuff in here. And then here, I can have my res. So I can say let res equal await. And I can wait these things out. Okay. And then I can go ahead and update my state. So I can say set to-dos at res.data.to-dos. We know that's what it's going to be because we wrote the backend. So I don't really need to check. And I'm going to call fetch to-dos. So this is always going to fetch Corey's to-dos for the time being, unless we end up actually putting auth in this application. Okay, so now that we've got our to-dos, we can iterate through them. So I could say to-dos.map to-do. Now, if I want to be really clean, I would probably do a to-do index item right here. But since this is just for a small project here, I'm just going to do my li like this and show my body. And this will have a key. That'll be to-do.id. Okay, so this is us using our use state and our use effect. And so let's go ahead and try this. So we go to our app. And it's gonna give us an error. It says expected an assignment or function call and instead sought an expression. So that's because my map doesn't return anything. So I'm gonna go ahead and just implicitly return instead of explicitly. I made that mistake yesterday too. And now we have exercise, eat, and dance all over the place. So now we have a little bit of an app happening.
Okay. I'm sorry, but do you mind explaining the empty dependency array? I think it was line 18. Yeah, 18.
So this is part of useEffect. So useEffect has a couple things to be aware of. First thing it takes in is this callback.
Mm-hmm.
This function runs every time useEffect runs. Okay, let that sink in.
Okay.
Next, it takes in what's called a dependency array. Dependency array. So the useEffect will run whenever anything in the dependency is updated or changed.
Oh, okay.
So anything inside of here that updates will cause useEffect to run, which will fire this
That
function.
function.
So, and that is how it's worked. And if you don't put an array like that, this will pretend that everything is in there. So useEffect will fire with any changes for anything. And that's why it's component did update. This is now the exact behavior of component did update and did mount, right? So if we don't want it to just continually update and run this use effect no matter anything, then we pass
You
this
put that.
dependency array. Now, if we only want it to run the one time when it first mounts, we can put an empty array in there. It's kind of like tricking it because it's saying, hey, keep track of these things. If any of these things change, go ahead and rerun. And it goes, well, there's nothing in there. And they go, all right, then I guess just sit tight.
Okay.
Right? So that's why we put this empty array in there.
Okay, that makes sense. Because I don't know, I think maybe like on one of my projects I was doing something wrong. Because then like the alert I would get was that there's nothing in the dependency array and to put something there. So I was like, it kind
Well,
of like threw me off.
it's linter wants things. But if the behavior is working the way you want it to, follow the behavior. Don't follow the linter.
Okay.
I interviewed somebody today on the whiteboard who had written code that worked, but they had a syntax error higher up, and so it said that their code at the bottom was unreachable, and they were like trying to ruin the way they'd written their code. And I said, why are you changing it? And they're like, no, because I don't think it's going to work. And I'm like, well, why do you think that? And finally they were like, because the computer's telling me it doesn't. And I'm like, yeah, that's because you have syntax. Your code's fine. Like, the logic of your code is right, and you're ruining it. You know, so you're always the boss. Don't let the linter decide. Maybe if it breaks, then you got to make a change for sure. So that's how you're using your component did mount, or your component did update, or your component did update based off of this or that, right? The last thing use effect can do is this callback function can return a function like so. And this will run. This function runs whenever component will unmount. So this function here will get fired whenever the component will unmount. So if you set some sort of listener somewhere in this function, and you want to turn that off when this component's going to leave, you do that in the return function.
Okay. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool.
This definitely made like a lot of things click.
Good. Oh, that's really exciting. I love to hear that. Okay, so now we have our index. So let's go ahead and make a to-do, shall we? So to make a to-do. So let's go back in here and we'll just call this new file, and we'll just call this create. I should do it in proud camel case. Create to-do form. Right? So if we're dealing with forms, so we'll import our React from React, export default, and for dealing with forms, we are probably going to be using use state, right? Because we want to keep track of what a user is putting in while they're putting it in.
Mm-hmm.
Corey, a quick question.
Yes.
So I came in late, but
Okay.
so you guys started the app from the beginning.
Yes, we built
So
the whole
you have
backend.
the database and all that jazz.
And
To
hosted.
create okay, cool. Okay, so I'll continue watching.
Okay, cool. Okay, so from here, we are going to keep going. And so let's, okay, so we said we're going to have a body for our to do, right? So
Right.
that's not, how would we, that sounds like something we would want to store in our use effect. Our use state, I'm sorry, I misspoke. I got confused for a second.
Would you set it as an empty array?
So the body is going to be text, right?
Yeah.
So what would really make sense to be initial?
Oh, an empty
A string.
string.
Empty string, exactly. We want to set this to be typically the same data type that it's going to be.
Okay.
With the exception of maybe like the way I often like to do my users, I either have my current user be null or the object of the user, which is also okay because then I'm checking for truthiness, like existence of or not. But if you're doing something like this, typically it will be, usually it's the data type that you're going to be dealing with. Okay, so we have this. Let's go ahead and return, and let's just go ahead and make a quick kind of form. And we'll have a little input in there. Inputs are self-closing. We need this to be controlled. Actually, I'm going to make this a text area, so it's a little bit more than input. But it's going to be the same kind of behavior. And so we want these to be controlled. So we're going to have this have a value of our body. This part is important, right? And so we also, we can put a type. The default will be text, so I'm not going to worry about it. But if I was doing a password, I would put a type of password. And here, we care about when there's a change. All right, we want to keep track of that change. So every time there's a change, it's going to fire some event. And that's where we can set our body to be our event.target.value. Sorry. Right, because this is going to constantly update.
So Corey, what exactly is text area?
A area for text.
Okay. Because I never seen that before. So I was like, is that a different input box?
It's a type, yeah, here, I'll show you. You've actually seen it on other websites. I might not have gone over it in the year. We usually use text inputs, but here. So let's say I want to have this at the top. And so I'm going to say to do, create to do form. It looks like this. See these boxes? So this way, I can type a bunch of crap, and it just keeps going like that. Because maybe I have a really long to do, right?
Yeah, okay.
And that's much better experience than if I have an input.
And it's just that one little line.
Right, because if it's just an input, it becomes...
Oh, yeah, that's annoying. And then you got to scroll back.
Yeah, it's like, this is not a great experience.
Okay.
So that's why for this one, I'm doing text area.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Let's go ahead and add an input for submission, or I guess maybe I'll just make it a button so it's a little bit more semantic. And I'll say create to do, and we will listen for, this will be type for submit, and our form is going to listen for our submit, right? So we can say on submit, we want to fire something like handle submit. I'm just going to call it that, and let's go ahead and create a function that does
So
that.
when do you know you have to put the on submit, when you should put the on submit on the actual button versus on the form, if you're even using a form?
Always goes on the form.
Okay.
If you're just listening for a button, you might as well be listening for handle click. You don't handle click, I mean, you don't submit like clicks and things, right? You're always submitting a form.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool, that's a good question. So this is going to throw an event, and since this is a form, the default is a type of post request, but we want it to be our type of post request. So that's why we do prevent default and invoke it. Without this, I'll show you what happens, just so we can be like, totally remember. Testing. And we get that weird question mark and the page refreshed. It's with prevent default. I don't want the question mark this time. I want it to be back to normal. With the question mark, I can say testing, create it, and nothing happens, right? Because now I have the control. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go ahead and import our Axios. And now we have to make some request to our backend. And so if we're going to be hitting our backend, what else might we need to import?
The API URL.
Perfect. I love it. Nice. I'm so happy you got that. It makes me feel like I'm teaching something. This is great, right? API URL. So let's do it. We'll say const API is equal to API URL. We'll invoke that. And let's go ahead and make our handle submit an async. And that way we can use await in here. And so let's go ahead and call res, like response. Now, I don't really know if we need a response. I think we didn't really send anything. Did we?
No, to create the to-do, I don't think so.
Okay. So this is going to be a little bit interesting, and we'll see why in a second. So let's go ahead and create the to-do. We'll say await Axios. I'm going to write it this way, so it's easier to convert it later to authentication. And I'm going to say method is going to be post. URL, we said, is going to be a API. Slash, wait, how do we do it in the other one? Brain fart. Oh, yeah. Great. Oh, yeah, that API. Right. Okay, that's okay. I got confused for a second because this next line is API slash to-dos. I think that's all that we had as our actual route. And then we have to pass in some data, which we said has a body, which is going to be the same as our body here. And we also said it was going to have an author ID. And so that I'm going to hard code again for right now that this is always Corey. Okay?
You're missing an R in author.
Thank you. Okay. So let's go ahead and try this out. So we have our code here. We'll write sing in shower. We'll create a to-do, and it looks like nothing happened. But when I refresh, it actually does happen. Who can tell me what's wrong?
We haven't added that new to-do to our list of to-dos. Maybe? Or it's not. Okay, so we create a to-do, hit create to-do, doesn't post it immediately, but when we refresh the page, then it shows up. So, okay, maybe there's a lag time.
Maybe. So part of the issue here is the design of the app. So we have our create form and our to-do index. And these aren't connected in any way, really, right? Because to-do index just calls fetch to-dos whenever there is a, whenever it mounts, while our create form just creates the form. So our to-do index doesn't actually fetch the to-do. So even though we can add a new to-do, and it is added, and I could clear the form to have more of an effect, we don't actually see it until we refresh.
Interesting.
Yes, this is a little bit interesting. Also, after this sets, I am going to clear our inbox. So I'm going to say set body to be empty. So the reason, so how do we get around this? It's annoying. I wasn't really anticipating this bug. That was short-sighted of me. So we could set up. So the reason this bug is happening is because it's two components with two separate states and they're not communicating. So if we added Redux to this project or Redux toolkit, right, then every time there's a change, then this function in our create form, when we submit our form, we could also be adding it into our application state, which would cause a change in the to-dos that it'd be looking at. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So
because it's like all linked.
Right, because it's all linked.
Yeah, that would make sense. So the to-dos index, that is, let me just read really quickly. That is getting all of the to-dos that we've entered.
Yep. On the mount, it's going to go on and fetch all the to-dos for it's hard-coded at the moment, Corey.
Okay.
So this is annoying, right? And this is easily solved if we would have set this up to be a bigger project. But since we didn't, we have to think of a way around this. Does anybody have an idea?
Importing and exporting. That's like the only thing I can think of.
What do you mean by that, importing and exporting?
I guess maybe like importing like one or like some aspect of one file into the other file as well to connect it.
Okay. I kind of like where this is going, right? So what I'm suggesting that we actually lift state. So if these had a parent component that could link their state, then the information could get filtered down. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. So let's just make a to-dos file. Okay, and our to-dos file for now is just going to be import React from React. We'll export default to-dos, and it's not going to take anything. Okay, but what we will also do is return. Let's have like a main component, and we'll just have a say to-do index. Sure, and we'll also have a form, just like how we had create to-do form. Okay, and now instead of app having those, app will just take in to-dos. Okay, so now we made a small adjustment. Our code's still not going to run, but we should check our code, and it looks the same. Same behavior, create a to-do. Still getting the same behavior. I'm waiting for the refresh. So now let's lift the state. So what does Corey mean when he says lift the state? So, sorry. Okay, so this has our create to do has its own little state, and then it has this handle submit, which is fine. And our to-do index has this fetch of to-dos. So what about if I just lifted this part of the state for the most part? So I could cut all of this code. So let's just go ahead and cut this code like so. Okay, so it's cut. Oh, it didn't cut perfectly. Let me cut it all the way so you don't lose the notes. Okay, let me cut it. And let's put it in our to-dos. Okay. We still need use state and all that. So let's update use state, use, not callback, use effect. Okay. And we have to-dos here, our API, we got to import that. So let's import. Well, I can just grab it now from here. Let me cut that as well. Okay. Let's see if anything's broken. Yeah, to-dos is not defined. No problem. Which to-dos are they talking about? Oh, it's talking about these to-dos. Okay, because that's now empty. So we have our use effect here. We'll have our fetch to-dos. We'll still fetch everything. But now we'll pass our to-dos in to the to-dos index. So we'll say to-dos is to-dos. This is how we would do it if we just wanted to do React without like Redux and stuff. See, Redux is really nice. Same with Context API because it solves some of these problems for us. Instead, now we're passing these in as props, and I can destructure those props. And now Axios is not defined. Okay, so we cut Axios here, paste that into here. I like to import the things I import from real libraries go at the top. Okay, so now we have, now it looks the same, but we still don't have a good thing here. Still no dice, right? Because I still can create, nothing happens until the refresh. So now I'm gonna add a new function that's gonna say const update to-dos. And this is going to take in a to-do. Well, it's actually not even gonna take in a to-do. I could have it take in a to-do, or I could just call fetch to-dos. And I could extrapolate this to be outside of our use effect. Well, in that case, I don't even need to call that. I already have fetch to-dos. Just bear with me. We're almost there. Okay, so we've just taken fetch to-dos out of our use effect now. And I'm going to actually pass this function to here. So I'm going to call this update to-dos. I'm going to pass in fetch to-dos. And so this is the name of the prop. I've decided. And so in my create form to-do, I can destructure my update to-dos. I don't know why I did all that weird movement. Why did it do that? Okay. Okay, there we go. So, and now in my handle submit, after I've already made this.
There's an S after line 11.
On
At
line
the end.
11.
Line 11.
Oh, I just must have did that. Thank you. I must try to save it. Okay, so now that we have update to-dos, and this is referring to the to-dos of the parent, right? I could just go ahead and call that and call update to-dos and invoke it. And with that minor change, now every time a new to-do is added, it will call update to-dos, which will update, which will really call fetch to-dos, which will go ahead and set the to-dos, which will change what we're passing in to our to-dos index. So now, let's try it. We'll say problem solved. And we will create our to-do, and it's right there.
Nice.
Nice.
Does that make sense? Let's talk
Yeah.
about that. Yeah?
It makes sense, but it was
Yeah.
a lot of switching. So can you go back over it?
Yes.
And real quick, this might be a silly question, but like with the like when we were keeping track of the to-dos, what would be the purpose of like using a custom hook, like let's say use input, since you can just do use state?
You wouldn't use it.
Okay.
Yeah. Realistically, you really only need custom hooks when you're doing when you find that you're doing a big like chunks of repetitive behavior, especially
Okay.
hook related repetitive behavior. So if my form there was really big, right? Maybe my form is more than just use state and
Hmm.
all that. Then I can make this nice custom hook for that use input.
Okay.
And
So if
maybe
you're
that makes my code a little cleaner.
okay, so like if you're collecting like way more information from that form.
Yeah, then I might start thinking about how I can make a custom hook for each input so that
Okay.
my code can be a lot cleaner instead of me having to do like that same on click e.handle event, e.target.value. Instead, I would just have my hook there, and I'm like destructuring part of what I came from my input.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. We could go. I think we should go over more custom hooks, but probably not today. I think it's more important to focus on use effect and use state,
Yeah.
especially for this, like kind of like the CTA type of thing. Custom hooks are like they should come out of necessity. Where you're like, fuck, didn't I just write this? And you're like, well, yeah. And then it's like, well, okay, let me make this into a hook so that I don't have to rewrite it.
Okay.
Okay, so let's go over how that. So before we had both elements in here, and they had their own separate kind of states where they weren't talking to each other, right? This is something that Context API or Redux/Redux Toolkit could solve, because something could change the global state of the app, and then this one could be listening or like subscribe to it, right? And so then it could update. So then they kind of work together a lot nicer. But in this case, since we decide not to use anything to share state, just to do like straight up traditional React, they have these two separate things and they're not talking. So we had to lift the state so that it could trickle down to both of these so that they could communicate from the parent. So this is just, we moved we made a to-dos component that just had our create to-dos form as well as this to-do index. And we took all the logic that had to do with grabbing all those to-dos, and we took them out of to-dos index and decided to just pass in those to-dos. But all the logic around like how we grab them all, the use effect and use state, we just moved that into this to-do. So we just like straight up cut out the use effect and cut out the use state and the API and just went ahead and passed in the to-dos. Now, we also used to have fetch to-dos inside of our use effect just because we weren't using it anywhere else. But now we wanted another component to be able to call fetch to-dos so that it would update this component's state. So we wanted a child to be able to update this parent state so that that child's sibling would be affected. So in order to do that, we passed the function fetch to-dos into our create form as well, although we called the prop by the name update to-dos just because it's going to be in that form, and I felt like that's really updating to-dos more so than fetching. But that's just like a user choice, and so I made that one. And so in our create form, we can destructure out that prop of update to-dos, which is really the function that goes and fetches them. And then whenever we submitted, we just went ahead and called update to-dos. Which in turn would fire our fetch to-dos and set the new to-dos to the state. A couple things that I should be doing that I'm not. Just try catch. Right? That's really, I should always be trying to write better and better code to protect code that protects us. Set to-dos. Set them back to an empty array or something, where I could also like communicate some error message, but I don't feel like it. Any questions on that?
How is it gonna look like when there is an error? How is it gonna look like 19?
So if there's an error, nothing bad will happen. So like, check this out. So let's say I'm trying to call this, but then I actually just throw an error.
Uh-huh.
Whatever. Right? It's not going to affect our app. It won't break our whole app. Oh, it does break our whole app. Why?
Did you save?
Throw error is not defined. Oh, because it's not one word. Sorry. So I threw an error and now we just don't see the to-dos. That's all. That's how it will look.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So I'm just protecting. Let's say I wanted to have some kind of error handler.
Mhm.
So if I wanted to have error handlers, right, I could have const and I could keep track of an error. And I could have set error. And I could have a use state for that. That has a null. Like it either exists or doesn't. And then I could set my error here to my error message or something. So let's say error dot. Well, for now, I'll just set it as error. We'll see what that turns into. And every time I make a request, let's say I want to fix that. So I'm just going to also set my error back to null on a successful request. And here I can add a little logic, right? I could say like, if there's an error, I want to show a div that has the error. Otherwise, just don't have it show up at all.
Oh, you put a question mark instead of a colon.
Oh, thank you. Right. Otherwise, don't show it at all. So now I can also update. I have this error. So let's see. Hopefully this will work. Maybe not. Okay. So this has to be error dot message. Sorry. I think these errors have messages usually attached to them. So it breaks and it says whatever, but we could have it break and say like, there was an error, right?
Mhm.
So when we refresh, we'd be like, oh, there was an error. Okay. That's why my request didn't work.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because like sometimes like you'll get to a page and you'll be like, okay, did it work or no? Did I get anything? So I think that would be good to have in the app too.
Yeah, so that's a really good thing to have, especially when you are using like auth. So here's a little project that I'm working on all last night till after 2. So let's say we go to our components and we have this login. See, I'm using error here and set error. And can everybody see that? Is it big enough?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So if for some reason, so I try to log someone in, but if it doesn't work for some reason, because like maybe that user doesn't exist or something, it will throw that error and it will set that error. So then above my form, it says like user does not exist.
Does not exist, yeah. I remember we did it like in projects.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. Okay, so that is kind of how we could build some basic to-do app. If we wanted to go further, the next thing would be a lot of authentication stuff. But I did make that auth video, and that might be good enough. So you'll have to let me know. But we would also be changing our backend routes again, so that instead of these queries where we're looking, instead of these queries where we're like using the author ID coming in on the body, we would have like some kind of request.body.id and add that to the body. because we would want the active user. Same with these, right? We would, instead of request.params.authored, we request.user.id because we would want the active user. Okay. Any questions at all?
No, that was everything for me.